Mark 2, check, check, Mark 2. Microphone 2, check for the live stream.
Testing 1, 2, working. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, let us get going. So, good evening and welcome to part 2. So, whether you are with me here or you are online, I hope that the next 45 minutes is going to be beneficial to you, and then you're going to take something away at the end of it. I mean, with all my talks, I do encouragement is always that you find something that you can leave with it and hopefully implement, and that it's beneficial to you. So I just quickly want to recap from last week. When my slides come up, there we go. So we discussed last week how the importance of planning and budgeting. That if we've got to have a plan, we need to start somewhere, and the only way you do that is be able to budget. And the budgeting is a sort of the starting process of changing maybe some of the mistakes that you've made, identifying where the money is, where it's going, and are there things within the budget that you can change. You need to be able to identify your needs and wants, and so many people confuse these, and I think it's an important thing to be able to do is that on that budget, on that list, whether you download a bank statement and you go through those things, you need to be able to say these are needs and these are wants. The needs are important things that I have to have, and the wants are those things that I can potentially change. We need to be able to manage our debt through the decision making. And today, when I go through the stuff that we're going to discuss, I'm hoping that the decision making becomes a little bit simpler, and there's maybe some pointers in there that you can use in helping in that process. We need to be alert. So we ended last week with just some of the scams that are happening and some of the things that people are doing to try and get that money of yours, and we want to stop that. So just being alert to things that are happening. And the last one is just our approach to money and finances needs to be different. And if you remember, I told you the story about Kobe. and that we have to attack all these things in a different way for us to get a different outcome. If we keep doing things the same way, we're going to keep getting the same results over and over. So it's important that we have a look at it. And today's talk is probably my most exciting talk that I do. It's the thing that sort of gets me going. It's the reason why in our own home we implemented so many of these things, because I sort of took the approach of Kobe to go, the only way things get better in my home, in my community, in my society, is I've got to do it differently. I can't keep doing what everybody is doing and then moaning at the end because it's not working. And so I want to ask you this question, and we've either said these things or we've heard them at some point. Any of these phrases, I'm not good with money. I'll never have enough. I don't even know where to start. I make mistakes that I often can't fix. My financial situation makes me depressed. Or just it's scary and I can't manage. Those are things we either say or we've heard, and it's common. The people we come across, most of us are finding ourselves in those situations. And I believe that a lot of it stems from what I'm going to go through now. And unfortunately, again, because of time, we're sort of restricted in how much detail I can give to these things. And so if this is something that interests you, I encourage you to go and read up a bit more about it. There are online quizzes that you can do to even help you identify which money personality you are. And so I've taken out 5, and again, depending on which psychologist you read, they'll have different names for them, or they might have 3 or 7. But I've kind of taken 5, and I'm going to have a quickly look at 5, and maybe from what I'm going to say to you, you'll quickly be able to put your finger on the one that you are. And you might even find that you might be a blend between 2 of them. I'm going to start with this one, the big spender. And this is the person who likes fancy. They like trends. They like the latest fashion. And they don't fear debt. They want to be seen. They want to be known. This is, if you remember my picture from last week on the wealth and the rich, this is the person who wants people to know that they're rich. You must be able to see it. So the big spender, they're happy to spend money on stuff that follows trends, that follows what society is sort of dictating to us. And my youngest daughter, when she was small, we had to be careful of this one. Because with children, they can quite easily become this because they want to follow those things. The peer pressure sort of creates that environment where if you don't control it, it's so easy to become this person. And if you can't manage this, well, you're not going to have money left. The second one I want to look at is the save. And the save is not always a good thing. Where it goes, I want to be the saver. I want to be the saver. The saver, yeah, when they refer to the saver, is the person who is almost pedantic about saving. So they're the person that, and I'm a little bit like that, you moan because the light wasn't switched off when you left the room, and that's electricity that we're wasting. It's the going down a hill and you freewheel because you don't want to use petrol going down the hill. You're saving on every little thing. The fridge is left open too long, and so that's going to be a problem. You save everything, but the question is always, okay, so once you've saved the 3 cents on the electricity, what have you done with it? And so the saver is so consumed in this thing of, I need to save, I need to save, I need to save. But at the end of the month, when you have a look at it, you go, okay, with all that saving that you did, what have you done? And so although it seems like a good thing, if you're not putting anything into action, you haven't really accomplished anything other than make people's lives miserable because you're moaning about everything all the time, trying to save. The third one is the shopper, and this person has buying urges. They're not like the big spender. For them, just any purchase gets them excited. It's not about buying the flashy thing. It's about just buying something. So your shopper, they get satisfaction out of buying. They don't need the fancy, and they save to be able to spend. So if they have 2 good months and their bank account is looking pretty good, in other words, they've managed to survive a month or 2 or 3, and there's actually money left in the account, they sort of feel the need that they can go and spend that now because they've done well. So that's the shopper. They like to just, they get a little bit of satisfaction of just being able to go and buy something on a regular basis almost. And it doesn't have to be a big flashy thing, but the need to be able to buy is good for them. And then you have the debtor, and this is the person who's just basically in trouble. They're not really managing things well. They don't think about money. They don't track it. And so the stuff just sort of accumulates. So they're not really spending money on flashy things. They're not at the shops just buying willy-nilly. but they don't really know where the money is going on because they've kind of signed a gym contract 3 months ago, which they're not using. They've got a cell phone contract which somebody sold them on top of another cell phone contract, and so they just signed it, and then they've got this running and that running, and they sort of buy for convenience, and so they don't sort of manage their money around buying at the shops, and the money just kind of runs out every single month, and they don't really know why. And then your last one is your investor, and this is the person who makes the money work for them. So again, a little bit like the saver, it's good, but you have to be careful that it's not all consuming, where everything is focused on saving to make, and you almost don't enjoy life that goes with it as well. So the investor is trying to turn all that money. They're looking for opportunities. They're looking for to be able to make the next bit of money, to be able to eventually have the being generated out of various things. And when you go through those, like I said, some of you will say, well, I'm sometimes that, I'm sometimes that. But there'll be a dominant one. Generally, for most of us, we'll fit into one of those money personalities. And those are the things generally that drive our decision making around finances. Most of those personalities stem from what your upbringing was like and kind of what you saw in your home. The saying's true when it comes to money is that opposites attract. And in homes, the clients that I deal with are often find that the husband and the wife have got opposite personalities. The one spends, the other one's trying to control the spending. And so it's quite often how the personalities, even in a relationship, often are different. So our financial life cycle is one of those things where it's important to understand kind of where you fit in. And if we get it wrong early on, it makes the rest of the cycle quite difficult of just sort of following its track. So growing up, we kind of taught skills, and the purpose of the skills was for us to go out so that we could get a job and make money. But we never really sort of taught how to manage the money that we're about to make. And so I want to start out just sort of explaining the general financial life cycle of most individuals. So our first sort of cumulative years are our education years, and that's the time that we sort of go through an education process to be able to hopefully put ourselves in a position to go and find work. And that period is going to range depending on when you sort of decide to finish your study. So it might be at 18 when you leave. Some people might go off and do, say, a 3-year tech or a 3-year degree at varsity. Some might study a bit further. And so I've just sort of put it at that 23. But that's the time that you are sort of just, you're gathering as much information, as much education that you can implement one day to be able to go and find work. And then we get to the next stage, which is up until roughly the age of 35. And those are the years where you're sort of trying to find your feet. You're making decisions. You're probably going to be making a whole lot of mistakes. But it's your starting out phase where you sort of, where am I going in life? What is the career I'm going to start sort of choosing? Where am I going to start settling one day? It's the big decisions that start happening around that sort of period of your life. And then your next 30-odd years is basically your growth, and it's your accumulation. It's the time that you've got when you're probably going to be at the point of your career where you sort of towards the top end of it, or you're definitely going that way with promotions. But it's your period of your life that you've got to kind of accumulate as much as you can. So assets, wealth, that's going to happen in those 30 years. And if we mess up the beginning stages, we delay this process, and the less amount of years we've got here, the harder it becomes for us. And then one day we get to that age of 65, 60, whatever it is, sometimes 70, whatever it is, that we start looking at this retirement. And then we look back on our life and we go, whoopsie. Didn't do very well in the first 65 years. I could have changed a few things. I could have done something differently. And so we hope that we one day get to sort of an age where we can say, I've done well, I've made good decisions, and I'm in a position that I can actually now take it a little bit easier. And next week we're gonna have a look at sort of just some planning around our retirement and putting things in place. And you know, for me, it's always been an interesting thing is retirement. The retirement concept is a new concept. It's something which hasn't been around since the beginning of time. It's kind of a thing that, as society, we've created this thing called retirement, that we must stop working. But as humans, I don't think we are meant to stop working. We're kind of meant to keep going in some fashion. And so it's an interesting thing that we've sort of created now, that we've got to create money so that one day we can actually stop working and then have this money look after ourselves. So we grew up in a home, most of us, I think, where we hear our parents reinforcing fear and negativity around money. And so what happens with that is that's what you kind of understand money to be. It's something that you must be fearful of. It's something that is going to always have a negative connotation. It's something that you worry about. And that becomes a big problem if we want to change the way people handle and manage their finances. Because if everybody's sort of going through the same cycle where we're scared of this thing, well, nobody then is ever in a position where they feel confident and willing to just go out there and do the right thing. And so in homes, we're happy to discuss the sex, drugs, and rock and roll is not a problem. We've got 2 girls in high school, and the stuff that they discuss through their curriculum, so not even stuff that they discuss on the playground, is coming through the textbooks and the curriculum. They're happy to discuss this kind of stuff. It's open. We have these discussions in the home. They have it in the classroom with the teacher. Nobody's scared to discuss any of those topics. But when we have a look at money in homes, it's a taboo subject. We don't talk about it. The family environment is one of those places where we don't talk money. We can talk about any of those other tough subjects because it's become norm. But when it comes to money, we keep that secret. We don't discuss it. As a family, we don't talk about it. And it's very much, it's a taboo subject in a lot of households. And my wife and I, from a young age, and again, I was fortunate. I landed up from teaching. I landed up in an industry where I saw the numbers, I saw the concerns. My girls were young, and we made a conscious decision right in the beginning that we can't raise our children in a home where we don't talk about this kind of stuff. They need to know what is happening. Why do we make decisions with the money? When mom and dad say there's no money for that, they knew why, because we were able to explain to them. We could show them. So money in our homes became an open discussion, and we were openly sort of, there it is. That's what we've got. That's in the bank account. This is what we're doing. This is what we're planning. They became part of some of those discussions. I'm going to share 1 or 2 of those stories as we go that came out of the talks that I did for parents on this. And it's so interesting that when you do these conversations, you learn from other people of what they did or how they changed the strategy. And you go, it's such a simple thing to do. And all of a sudden, their home was working differently because of just a concept that sort of ignited them into a discussion about money. So a lot of parents will say to me, these are the reasons that they give why we don't discuss it. So it's not a way that I was raised. I don't feel sort of equipped to have this conversation. I'm not really in a position to speak to my kids about it. I mean, I'm struggling myself. How can I go and impart any sort of knowledge towards my children? And so that's some of those reasons that I think we share, and so we don't have those conversations with our children. And so Robert Kiyosaki, and he writes about this quite a lot, he speaks about this unfair advantage that we should be giving our children. And those 2 words almost don't go together because an advantage should never be unfair. But he says that the homes and the families who discuss money, who equip their children to one day go out into the world understanding how to manage money and control money and work with money, have given their children an unfair advantage. They're in a better place than most other children because they understand this thing which is going to control their lives essentially. Because if you can get that right, you just put yourself into a different position with the decisions that you make. So this is the industry that most of us grew up in. I have a look here, and I'm sure most of the people online, we were brought up in a culture where you sort of had a career path. You probably had one job, maybe a switch in careers, but you were kind of, that was going to be your career, and you worked and you worked and you worked and you saved and you saved and you saved. There was a simple process that pretty much fits into my life cycle that I showed you earlier. That would be the process of most of us. Our children, unfortunately, are part of a different generation. And if we have a look at which, and I want to tell, which was quite interesting, that these slides, I think, came out of 2016 when I did a talk. The last point on the left, on your right, work at home, was already a thing that corporations were concerned about with the new generation, is that the career path that a lot of them were going into would be working from home, working from the coffee shop, working from some satellite little office. That was before COVID had happened. It was already part of a generation where those things were starting to slowly happen. And when you have a look at that profile of the new working class, you'll see that if you don't get your money management correct, you're going to have a big problem because you're not working paycheck to paycheck to paycheck where you know what's going to happen. A lot of the new sort of generation are working in jobs where there's a lot of consultancy work, where there's big money to be earned, but there's potentially 3 or 4 months of no money. And so if we can't manage our money correctly and learn how this thing is going to work, you're going to have a big problem. So the potential is there for a lot of our young people going into the workforce to earn good money, but it's not going to be in the fashion that you and I have grown up, where it's just going to be a salary month after month, and we can plan and we can budget. And so your planning, your budgeting around this kind of new generation of working is going to be very different. And if you don't get it right, there's going to be a problem. So I want to read the story because I find this quite interesting, and it kind of goes along with a lot of the stories that I tell. So this is from Alice in Wonderland, and it's actually got nothing to do with money, but if you read it, it actually has a lot to do with money. So would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? Well, that depends a great deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. Well, I don't much care where, said Alice. Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. Well, so long as I get somewhere, Alice added, as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you only walk long enough. If we don't have a plan, we don't really have a destination or a journey. And you're just going to keep going along, keep going along, keep going along. And so although that story isn't linked to that, I find it's a good connection, because that's exactly the situation so many people are in. They're Alice. They kind of just, they're stumbling along, they're just going, and there's no place that I really want to go. And yes, maybe you get there, maybe you don't. But there's not really this journey that I can kind of help you on if you don't have the plans. So the question I always say to parents when they're struggling to sort of have this discussion is, so if you could start over, what would you do differently? I think we've all got those sorts of things that we can think about straight away. And the second is, what would you tell your younger self? Because that's kind of where my wife and I started with our children. Tell them kind of stuff that I would have liked to have known when I was younger. So those are the things that you can start with. The basic things that you kind of go, yeah, if only somebody told me that when I was 18, it would not have taken me 4 or 5 years to eventually get into that process. So we've heard this, that investing is risky, but what's interesting is the line underneath there, that being financially sort of illiterate almost is more risky than even investing. So we can make decisions with our money, but if we don't know how we're making those decisions, that's even worse than making any decision. So most parents have got an expectation. My wife and I had expectation, and you're raising them, you kind of have got this more like the cat was explaining to Alice, you've got this end goal of where you would like your children to be, academically, sporting, cultural, and we spend money on extra lessons and private coaching, and we focus on those kinds of things, and we want them to have good morals and ethics and values, and so we instill those sorts of things. And then there's the religious background and the relationships, and we want one day that they're going to be able to get a good job because they worked hard at school and all the rest of it. But in that whole process, I can guarantee you, if I handed out a survey of ordering those things, or in fact not giving you that and just saying in an order, what are your biggest expectations of your children, I don't know if financial literacy or money management would come up in your top group. Most people would list all those others because those are common things that we expect our children, we want them to have. We want to develop those skills in them so that they can go out into the world and cope and do well. But we don't focus on the one, to me, that's going to kind of hold this whole thing together, of being financially literate, being able to take all those valuable lessons, be this great person that you sort of developed and go out into the world and then cope financially because you've been equipped to be able to go and do it. You've been given that unfair advantage that Robert Kiyosaki speaks about. And so this story came out of one of my sort of presentations, and it's an interesting story because it's a simple one, but again explains it so nicely. So it's a story of the tip collector, and this family are traveling, and like a South African family, you drive in from, say, here to Cape Town, and along the way you stop out at an Ultra City and you have a breakfast, and later on you stop and you have a lunch. And the parents realized after a while that the little boy, their little son, was getting to the car later every single stop. And eventually the dad said to the young boy, he said, boy, each time we stop, you arrive later at the vehicle than everybody else. What have you been doing along the way? And he said, well, Dad, each time we leave the restaurant, you leave your money on the table. So I've been staying behind and collecting it for you. So he thought his dad was being careless in the tip that he was leaving on the table. But the boy didn't know. So there's a teaching moment in that, is that we need to teach children because they need to understand these things. And the only way you know that kind of stuff is if somebody's told you it. So you've explained it at the table as to why are we tipping? Why do we leave the money? What is it for? And so in our home, Grace has become our tipper. So at the end of an evening, she will take the bill and she'll tally up, and she will, luckily she's the kindest of all of us, she will leave a tip. And that's her decision to make. And we've left that. And so again, like I say, our money decisions are open to our family. We don't hide that away. She writes on the bill, she does the calculation, and she then allocates a tip to the waitress. In the beginning, our oldest daughter, Annabelle, she would be given that responsibility, and she would take that. And it's not just the money thing. There's an educational value in that as well, because you think if you've got a 7-year-old, my wife will back me up there, if you've got a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old and they're doing bonds in class, the simple thing to take that, there's a couple of things that are happening. You've got to be able to put it into a percentage. So if you've decided on 10%, you've got to take that number and quickly come up with an answer. You've then got to be able to round that number off. So again, there's a rounding skill. So there's little skills that happen, and I can give you endless stories of the games that my wife and I played with our children while we sat at restaurant tables. You know, so many kids are sitting there on their phones, or there's families that are sitting and nobody's talking to each other. And there's opportunity with small kids to take out a whole lot of coins and just play games with it. You can get them to interact because you're not only just learning something there, but you're developing bonds, you're developing skills, you're having conversation just out of something simple like that. So that for me is just, it's one of those things we've got to teach our children these things. Because if they're not going to learn it from us, who are they going to learn those things from? So pocket money is one of those things, and it's a hotly debated contest. And if you go and you research this, you'll find the pros and the cons against it. I'm going to push the pros because we've done it, we've seen it work. I think like anything in life, it's the way you do it, which then creates the negative side of it. And so if you do it, I believe, in a structured manner, and you do it well, and there's talk around it, I believe there's some value that can be learned in it. But for us, it was giving our children money with the opportunity that they could learn from it. I'm going to go through some of those skills that they learn. But just some of the things that we sort of use to develop from the pocket money system that we use with our kids. It promotes responsibility where children have to make decisions with money. It engages them in a savings habit, and I'm going to go through that, what we did, because it's one way that they can start doing that. They understand that the connection between money and work. So we didn't have like set chores. If you did this, you earned that. We had things that they were expected to do. And so from a young age, just off the top of my head, I can remember one of them was when they got home from school, their homework book had to be out on the kitchen table, their lunchbox had to be at the sink. Those are things that they should anyway, but those were the things that had to be in anyway. But those were sort of the tasks, washing dishes, packing away. And so even today, they don't earn pocket money for doing those things, but they're expected to carry on with those chores. They still earn their pocket money. They get it, even though they do babysitting and animal feeding and that, and they earn a little bit of their own extra money on the side. But we still give them pocket money every month, and I'm going to explain that later as to why as well. So it helps with the concepts of debits and credit, helps enforce concepts of needs and wants, teaches them the value of money, learn that money has an end. That's so important. And here again, I want to say, if you're going to go that route, don't bail kids out all the time. If they make mistakes, let them make the mistake, but don't keep feeding them more and more. End of stories of children going off to varsity who don't have these sorts of skills, and you hear the parents moaning because 2 weeks into the month they've spent all the money, and mom's moaning because she's got to put more money into the account and more money. Well, the child's not going to learn to manage the finances if you keep topping the account up all the time. So it teaches them that there's an end to this money thing, and then there's an opportunity to make mistakes. And again, it's one of those stories, and I know we always push for time, but I get excited about this. But my youngest daughter So she was, I want to say, 5 at the time. There was a craze on at the school, and there was something that you could buy, and it was actually very expensive for what you were getting. And her older sister had got one of these things, and so she kind of felt as though she wanted to be part of this craze that was happening at school. And she had money that she had saved up from her pocket money, and the more she wanted it, the more we tried to encourage her not to buy it, because we knew it was going to be a waste, there were going to be tears, it wasn't going to work out. Eventually, she wasn't going to budge, and so we like, go for it. Make the decision, spend your money, buy it. And it was a terrible mistake, because she got no value out of it. It was a waste. She wasn't capable of playing with the thing because she wasn't old enough, she wasn't skilled enough. And so this thing basically just lay in the room. There was no value to it. We didn't give her money back. She lost that money. It's a terrible lesson. It's sad when you think about it. But the lessons that we were able to get from that later, in that every time she had a decision to make, we could have a reference. And we could go back to them and say, are you sure you want to do that? Do you remember when you spent your money on that? And eventually she gets to that point where she goes, no, I don't want to make that mistake again. And we're talking about a 6 or 7-year-old child who's able to make decisions because they've been in that situation where they can make sensible decisions because they've had to do it themselves. And so even now she's older, she still goes through those debates with us over and over, and eventually, most times, she makes the right decision. She still makes mistakes. She probably always will. But I think she gets more right than wrong now, because she's learned from the mistakes of being able to make those decisions. Okay, so what we did with our kids, and it's a very simple concept, is that we had three compartments for each of our children. So they would get their pocket money right in the beginning. And we're going to start with the first one. And we're going right back. They were young, so they were 4 and 6 when we started this thing. And they got 5 rand a week, so it was easy. And they would take 2 rand and they would stick it into their saving part. And they would take 2 rand and they would stick it into their spend. And they'd take 1 rand, and they'd give it into their give box. And so every week they would allocate money. And we go, back. So those are kind of your 3 concepts of the 3 things you can do with money. You can save it, you can spend it, you can give it. And then somebody said to me, you can lose it as well. We're not going to discuss losing because that I can't control. But the 3 that we can do is save, spend, and we can give. And if we learn those concepts early on, they should become a natural thing for everybody. And if we can get this right all the way through our sort of working career, I think then we've done pretty well. So our save, the reason why we do that is because it's a discipline. And you need to instill it. It needs to become a habit. So my wife said, I've got to share the story. Our daughter is off to varsity next year, which most people will know comes at a cost. And so we had changed bank accounts, and Melanie went into the bank to be able to close her account to move it across. And in closing the process, the lady said, and this money that is lying in this account, what do you want to do with it? And he's like, there shouldn't be money there. And then we remembered many years ago, because we knew this day was going to come, that habit was started. There was a process of putting money aside so that you just forget about it. That's what it's supposed to be. Start the process so that it just happens. And then one day when you need it for the purpose, it's there. I'll tell you endless stories of people who have come to me. I've had a lady sit and fight with me because I shared with her that she had money sitting in an investment, and she said she doesn't. It's a mistake. It can't be hers. I'm going, but it is. It's your money. And the more we sort of argue, I said, look, the money's there. It's linked to you. You can do what you want with it. She said she just wants to go and think about this. She went home, and in a discussion with her dad, the dad said, I made you start that when you were 18, when you left school. Can you not remember it? 40, she was over 40, so it was 20 odd years later. The money now is lying there, and she goes, oh yes, I remember that. Saving is that. It's a discipline, it's a habit that you need to just start. If you don't start it, it's never going to happen. It gives you that head start. It gives us the opportunity now to send our daughter off to varsity with that bit of money that we've put aside. It gives us the head start to be able to go, yes, you can go. We've got something to support you with that. Because of that change in environment I spoke you about earlier, if we don't get the saving part right, it's going to become a problem for people. If you're going to go into a career pathway, and I was thinking off the top of my head very quickly, an estate agent, somebody who sells property, you're not selling houses every single month. There's going to be periods of you not having a house sold. If you can't get the apartment right, you're going to have lean months. You're going to have months that you're going to struggle if you just live on the month that you earn in money. And then the effect of compound interest, which we're going to get to at a later stage in one of the talks. And then spend, and that was the neck water. And the reason for the spend, too many people don't allow their children to spend the money. They work so hard on that other one because that's the one we are so consumed by and we're so worried about because we're not doing a good job at it, that we don't focus on this one. And I think this one is more important than that one, because if I can get my children to be good spenders, they're going to become better savers. If they get this one wrong, they can never put money aside. So this one, to teach a child, to teach yourself, I believe, is even more important than saving properly. If you can spend wisely, you're going to be a very good saver because you're just going to have more to be able to save. And so we encouraged our children to learn to spend the money. We forced them to go into the shop with their R2 and buy something because we wanted them to learn that they've got to release money. You can't hold on to the stuff forever. At some point, you have to give it to somebody else. You're going to have to buy a house. You're going to have to rent a house. You have to buy a car. You're going to have to put petrol in the car. You have to buy your own groceries and your own deodorant and all those things. And if you don't want to part with your money, you're going to have a problem. And again, it's one of those lessons that children at varsity learn, is that I'll tell you stories of people who go, my child's got money in the bank account, but I keep having to buy the stuff and going because he's too scared to spend it. You've got to be encouraged to learn to spend so you can make the decisions with it. They need that freedom to be able to make the mistakes in their spending. So yeah, it gives them response, it gives them freedom. They make decisions in the spending. They don't make decisions in saving. It's easy just to put it there and let mom and dad buy everything. You've got to be able to have the opportunity to go and spend that money. And this is something that we've tried to instill in our children. I think it's a valuable lesson for most people, is which of those two items is more expensive? And if we look at it face value, you're going to tell me that a pair of tennis shoes is the more expensive pair of shoes. And then I'm going to tell you the story that this pair of black shoes was for a matric dance worn once. And I'm going to tell you that that's the more expensive pair of shoes. Because I don't mind paying 1,200 Rand for a pair of tennis shoes that my daughter wears 3 times a week and will last her a year. She'll get probably, 150 wears out of that. So that's going to cost her probably 10 Rand a wear versus 100 Rand. And we need to look at our money decisions, our buying, our spending decisions around that kind of stuff. What is the value that I'm going to get out of this thing? What is the Rand value that I'm going to generate by this purchase that I make? So if I'm buying a work shirt, I don't mind spending money to get a quality work shirt because I know it's something that I'm going to wear on a regular basis. And if I tally those things up, I'm going to get a good Rand value per wear. But I'm not going to go and spend that same amount of money on a shirt for me to go out once, because I'm going to go, I'm probably not going to wear the shirt again. That's not good money. It's not a good decision to make. And so those are the things we've tried to learn, get our kids to learn from us, is that when you make that decision, and Grace will remind us often of this, of the stuff that she spent good money on a pair of shoes or a pair of tracksuit pants, and she'll say, but I wear them all the time. And we're going, well done. That's it. That should be the idea, rather than the expensive pair of shoes that's lying in your cupboard and you're not wearing it. That's a poor decision. And then the giving part, I think, is so crucial, because again, it's one of those things that it's humanity. It's being able to help out. It's being able to take money because you have money and you can help somebody else. Anybody who's in a position to get money from their work or through pocket money is in a position far greater than somebody else. And so we've tried to instill that in our children as well, where you must learn to give some of that back, whether it be the church or charity or an animal shelter, or whatever it is. But we want to instill that in our children, because part of that money that you're getting shouldn't always be for you. It's there to help other people as well. And when it's again up the saving and the spending, it's the good habit that's formed. So we know a couple where the wife grew up in a family going to church all the time, pocket money into the collection bowl, husband, also church, all the rest of it, but didn't grow up in that environment. And so he says, giving to the church, he does it, but it's hard. His wife, who's done it all her life from Sunday school, simple. She says, that's just what you do. And so it's that principle, it's that habit that we want to get into our kids, where they just do it, where they're not thinking about it because it was never theirs. And I don't know if any of you have ever come across this. Malcolm Gladwell writes about it, and he's not the only one that's used it. It's the 10,000 perfect hours to perfection. And the more we do something, the better we become at it. And so there's a sort of this study that they've done where they've taken some of the top musicians, some of the top sportsmen, and they've analyzed them, and they've kind of come up with this magic thing, is that these people practice for at least 10,000 hours at whatever it is that they do, and that's how they become good at it. And if we do this from a young age, if we develop these things in our homes, in our families, and the more hours we spend towards it, the more sort of accustomed we become to having these conversations and doing the right thing in our budgeting, our planning, the decisions we make, we become more perfectionists. We become better at the decisions that we make. And so I'm going to end off quickly with just the topic of the savings and emergency. Now, I touched on it last week briefly, and the importance behind just having this little nest egg. And again, speaks to the youth, it speaks to the young generation, is that this has become an important part of this career that you're going to go on. You need to create this sort of emergency fund. And the emergency fund, and I've kind of highlighted, it's stuff that is going to happen, but it's generally not things that you're going to be paying for every month. So it's the new tires that your car might need. It's the extra sort of medical treatment that you land up in an emergency room because you've fallen and broken your arm, and there's a payment that you need to make. It's those things that generally will happen, but they don't happen all the time. So they're not part of your monthly spend, but they come up from time to time. And then there's those sort of freak accidents that happen that we're not expecting, but they do happen. That's why you need to have this sort of rainy day emergency savings fund. And however you do it, find a way that works for you, but it goes back to that start the habit. Put some money aside every month somewhere for this. Allocate it. So I spoke last week about the envelope system that my wife and I use. It's old, it's archaic, but it works. Every month, some money, and you can set this up however you want. This money's for this money's for that, that money's for that. So when that day comes, the money's already been allocated. We've got it, we can do it, we can pay it. It's now not coming out of our monthly expenses. And I've ended off there because I think this is what sort of answers the whole thing, is that it's better to put 200 Rand aside now every month than pay 200 Rand to the bank because you've borrowed the money, because there you're paying interest as well. You're still paying the 200 Rand, but you're now paying additional to the bank because you've now borrowed that money. Start early, start putting it aside, work towards that, build up some kind of kit, and even if you don't have the separate ones, go and say, these are the 4 things that are potentially going to be happening in the next 12 months. Just have one separate savings account that you just dump a little bit of money into every single month. So when the tires need to be changed, you've got the money. When that thing comes up, you've got the money. You can do those things. Create that little nest egg that is there to support you during those times. And then in ending, these are some of the points that we're just going to end with. So clear up clutter. So the stuff that is happening just generally around you, so whether I'll just put that. If you haven't been doing it, it potentially might take you a bit longer. If you have been doing it, it will be quick. I can assure you it gets quicker. Kind of keep where you keep it, how you allocate it, and eventually it takes you a few minutes to put all that stuff together. But dedicate some time every month, at the end of the month preferably, just collect your bank statement, collect those things, allocate, see what is happening in your financial life so that you can make decisions. Avoid emotional spending. When we're upset, we land up just going to the shop, especially if you're the money personality of the shopper. Stay away from shops. If you know that that is you and you're feeling down, phone a friend rather, but don't land up going off to Vincent Park or Hemingway's, because you know what's going to happen. You're going to spend, and then you're going to be disappointed later on because the month now is tight and you've got these 3 things sitting there which are not being used. Protect yourself against impulse buying. So we all know why the shops put all the chocolates and the sweets and close to the tills because it's that. It's as you go past. It's the impulsivity of you just grabbing it. And I mean, the best story is the trolleys that come with the kids, and the kids just want as they go. And again, there was a reason behind our madness in this box over here. Because when we got to those situations, we saw children having tantrums and fighting. And so our philosophy was always, you've got the money, buy it. So there was never, Mom, Dad, can we have, you can have it. There's your money, buy it if you want it. And Melanie will attest to this. Most times our children didn't buy it. They didn't really want it. When they have to make the decision with their own money, they're a bit more picky. When there's a chocolate for X and there's a chocolate for X, and it's their money, they buy that one and they're perfectly happy with the cheaper one. So they still got what they wanted. They made a decision. Stop bailing people out, and especially the kids. If you've got older kids who are making these, stop helping out. Find a way that you can manage them. Help them in a different way to keep giving them, because they're not learning from that mistake. Be honest with yourself. You've got to have a look at the money, the way you're spending, what you're doing with it. The only way you fix that with any kind of addiction is you've got to be honest with yourself first, because if you don't fix that, it's not going to fix itself. Watch your wastefulness, and that can be in many areas, just stuff that you're wasting when you're buying and you're not actually using. If you buy things, I like this one, if you buy things you do not need, soon you'll have to give up the things that you do need. So going back to decision making, make the right decisions up front, and then it's going to be so much easier later on. And the last one, just become accountable to somebody. If you are struggling with it, become accountable to somebody who can help you. Find that person that you can trust and be accountable to them. So if it comes to the impulsiveness or the emotional side of things, or you're just making bad decisions, find that one friend or that family member or that person that you can become accountable to go and need help. How can you help me? Or this is what I need you to do for me so that I can get myself out of this mess. I hope, again, there was some value in it. I hope that you can take something away from that. And like I say, always open discussion, but it's a topic that I love speaking about. And I think as a community, as a society, if we can kind of equip homes to just be better prepared for children who are coming out of the homes, that they go out into the workforce one day, that they can make better decisions, that they get that unfair advantage from us, I think then you've done a good thing. So thank you again for joining online, the people that are here, and we'll see you again next week.